in a mirror because you're supposed to go east first, but I'm facing you, so east is behind. Anyhow. So on Sunday, day after Yom Kippur, we built our sukkah in our backyard. And we brought our sukkah from Los Angeles. In fact, technically, I think I smuggled it into the country because it's made out of wood, and it sits in our backyard. This sukkah we've had for about 6 or 7 years. It gets bugs on it and dirt. And our mover said, "Well, you can't bring wood with dirt and bugs on it into the country. They won't let you." But he put it in the belly box of his truck, and he said, "If they ask, I'll just tell them it's wood that I used to shore up the load or something like that." So my sukkah was smuggled in. Please don't tell anybody at Border Services. I should have. Al Chay Shechatanu for smuggling a sukkah into Canada. Thank you, Rita. So we put it up in our back. I've told you before, we have this wonderful neighborhood that we live in. We live on the east side near Naomi and Rabbi Brown. And on our street there are 14, my children are 7, 5, and 2. And there are 14 kids, 7 and under, on our street. And they all run around in this giant pack. They're in each other's houses and yards and playrooms. And they kind of hang out at our house a lot, which is great. We really love it. And, was it Robert Frost, good fences make good neighbors? We don't have a very good fence, but we have great neighbors. So our fences are kind of low, and everybody can see into each other's yard. And as this sukkah's going up, all of a sudden, neighbors start to come out and like, "So what you building there, Rabbi? What's going on here?" So I had this wonderful opportunity to explain Sukkot to our wonderful neighbors. I'm pretty sure we are the first Jewish family that they've ever really gotten to know, and this is for sure the first sukkah they have ever seen. Anyway, it's that great moment where you get to explain a Jewish holiday, and as you're explaining it, of course, to someone else, you're reminding yourself of its importance and significance. And then, so that was Sunday. After school, I come home, and all of these kids are in my backyard decorating our sukkah. So there's 14 kids, only 2 of which are Jewish, and my 2 are really not that interested in decorating. They're very good at directing. And teaching them how to, string colored pasta noodles. That's one of the things that we do together. And, paper chains, which we've discovered are not going to hold up in the elements. And plastic fruit and the whole thing. And it was adorable. And, I kind of sat back in my yard and I thought, wow, this is what Sukkot's supposed to do. It's supposed to bring people in. It's supposed to gather people together. And, that's not an always easy thing to do. Now I'm going to go to notes. Sukkot has a commandment with it. I mentioned it before. That's the mitzvah of inviting people in, of ushbuzi. Not only imaginary people, but real, physical, actual people into our sukkah. And that is a hard commandment. I mean, the other commandment of Sukkot is leishev basukkah, to sleep and dwell in your sukkah. And we think, oh, well, that must be hard, to eat a meal there, to sleep out in the ground. But that's not nearly as hard as it is to invite people in, right? And it's an important commandment. We're commanded to do this even though it makes us uncomfortable. And it's not just any people. But we're commanded specifically to invite in the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, that biblical trifecta, if you would, of all the people that get left out of things, all the people that don't normally get included, that find it difficult, that go through life feeling alone or estranged or forgotten, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. So why? Why do we invite the widow, the orphan, and the stranger into a sukkah? I mean, what could it possibly do for them? As Rabbi Brown pointed out, on Sukkot morning, I think it was, it's a lousy shelter. I mean, as things go, it's not going to provide you any warmth. It's not, the roof has holes in it. It's not going to give you shelter from the rain. So if you're the orphan living on the streets or something like that, this isn't going to do much for you. You say, oh, but there's a meal. Yeah, there's a wonderful festival meal of Sukkot, but it's a one-shot. Or 7 days, of Sukkot. It's not like it's going to sustain the person that is food insecure. So why invite them into Sukkot? I mean, there are agencies out there that do a much better job of, providing for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger than Sukkot could ever do. So why? What does Sukkot offer them? What does Sukkot offer them that they don't have in their life? What's that? Community. Exactly. So it's the mitzvah of hachnasat orchim, of welcoming the visitor or the strangers into our midst, the guests. And we are able to do something with Sukkot that the widow, the orphan, the stranger, all of us, because we are all, at some point in our lives, a version of a widow, right? Immersed in sadness. A version of the orphan feeling removed or without family to support us, and the stranger feeling uncomfortable even in familiar surroundings, not sure how to get in. We are all the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. What Sukkot does is it breaks down those barriers. It says, come in. Feel the power of community. Feel the power of family. Feel the power of this Sukkot Shlomecha, of this shelter of God's presence, and us, by an extension of that, of being God's presence. Sharon and I, my wife and I, we felt like when we came to, I mean, we didn't, it's Canada. I mean, people joked, oh, you're going to the 51st state. No, nobody that joked like that understands. But it's a different country. I mean, the money looks different. I don't know any of the names on the streets or the schools. I have no idea who these people are. And there's this cultural disconnect. We felt like strangers, even though the language was familiar, even though it's the same Siddur here that it was in Los Angeles, and the melodies, more or less the same, and Jews are Jews, but we felt like the stranger. Right, exactly. You're all Democrats. Right. But you welcomed us in. You brought us into this Sukkot Shlomecha, this shelter of peace. And yes, you fed us. You fed our house every day. For the first 2 weeks, somebody was schlepping food to our home. It was incredible. But it wasn't the food. The food was just an entree to the entree. The food was just an introduction to an introduction. An opportunity to get to know you, to break down those feelings of strangeness, to break down that feeling of orphanage, because we left our whole family back in the States. And even that feeling of sadness at leaving family and at leaving friends. And you broke those things down. What's that? So why did I do it? Because you're a wonderful community. And I knew that coming in, but I learned that more when you invited me in. And that's the power of Sukkot. Think of that experience not just for me as your rabbi, but for anybody. To be invited into somebody's home, their sukkah, whatever it is, to have those walls broken down, to be held like family. Brad Artson says that, Rabbi Brad Artson, a teacher of mine in Los Angeles, observes that a single hand can touch where a battalion of people cannot touch. A single hand can reach out where a battalion of people cannot reach. There are wonderful organizations and agencies and online services that help you acclimate to a new place, or help you find love on the internet, or meetup groups and all these kinds of things. There are, but nothing beats the human connection. That thing that we do at the beginning of services, which I know is new for some of you, and we did it tonight, and it might have been uncomfortable for some, where I ask you to get up from your seats and go find somebody and introduce yourselves. I could just say, let's all say Shabbat Shalom. We could all say Shabbat Shalom. It's printed on the handout. But for somebody to reach out to you and say Shabbat Shalom, to introduce themselves, that's to bring them into your sukkah. That's to bring them into this sheltering presence, to say, you're welcome here. I'm going to break down some of those walls and build some walls around us together. By practicing the mitzvah of Haknasat Orchim, of welcoming guests, we go beyond the physical needs of the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, and we tend to their spiritual needs that we all have. Ultimately, hospitality is a question of defining our community broad enough so that no one is left out, so that no one feels like they are a widow stuck in the depths of sadness, an orphan alone in a sea of people who have families and connections, a stranger unfamiliar and unsure of how to enter into a group. But this is, of course, not only a mitzvah for Sukkot, it's a mitzvah for all time. If we did it only once a year, it would be a novelty, but our commandment is to do it all the time. And the way that we do that is not only through greeting each other at synagogue, which is an important part of what we're trying to do here, to be, as synagogues are known, or trying to be known now, as a warm and welcoming community. But we want to offer you a tool to go beyond just what happens here. And that's why we are launching reinvigorating a Havurah program here at the synagogue. You heard David Schwartz speak about it a couple of times, a flyer, and you're hopefully going to hear more and more about it over the next 6 weeks or so as we push for this. Havarot are these wonderful inventions from the 70s. Not that many great things came out of the 70s, but classic rock. But Havarot are this idea that we need to have communities within our communities. That while we are one community, that is not intimate enough. We need to have Sukkot within our sukkahs, right? Within Sukkot at large, little tiny sukkahs. And so we want to invite you to engage in this act of Hachnasat Orchim, of welcoming the stranger and being the stranger. And doing that bold, courageous thing by signing up, going online or calling the temple and saying, I would like to meet other people that share my interests, my demographic, my place in life, my geographic location, whatever it is that works for you. And we'll make shirachim, we'll bring you together, and we'll make little groups, little sukkahs of people that will experience Jewish holidays together and will journey through life together, the joys and the oys of Jewish life, to be there for you as family is in times of sadness and in times of joy. To make a connection beyond just a hello, hi, how are you, this is my name. But to really feel that warm embrace, that Sukkat Shlomecha, that shelter of peace. A Havarah is a place where you both invite others and feel invited yourself. A place where you are supported in times of sadness, others to celebrate with you in times of joy. It's an extended family, an experience that will quickly feel entirely familiar, as together as a group you will establish your own customs, your own minchagim, your own ways of doing things and traditions. So I invite you to do that. If we can take the lesson of Sukkot beyond just this wonderful holiday, if we can take the lesson of my neighborhood, which didn't really know each other, or they knew each other, they didn't know us. If we can take the lesson of that experience and say, well, let's get together and do things together. So I'll tell you what's so wonderful about my neighborhood that we've joined and entered into. So we had a movie night on Yom Kippur, but it was a movie night. And my kids finished services here because, it was late, whatever, and they went home and all the kids had a back-to-school movie night in somebody's home. That's the kind of thing a Havarah does. Tonight was Esty, our 2-year-old's birthday, and Sharon made a cake, and everybody has dinner around the same time on our street. And so afterwards, we invited everybody to come over and have dessert, and we all had cake together. And that's a thing that a Havarah, that a community, that a neighborhood does. I know how fortunate I am to live on that street. I know how fortunate I am to be your rabbi and to have people come over to my home and welcome me into the community. But not everybody gets that. Not everybody lives on that street or gets to be the rabbi in a community where it's a mitzvah to do this. So let's create that. Let's take this example of Sukkot and extend it all year and extend it into the lives of each other to create that warm embrace, that sense of the familiar, the sense of family. Shabbat Shalom.